Is Nader Hashemi, Associate Professor of Middle East and Islamic Politics at Georgetown University. Professor, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. Firstly, in the past few days and weeks, Israel has managed to destroy Hezbollah's weapon sites, disrupt its communication networks, and assassinate its veteran leader whose location was a closely guarded secret for years. So what can you tell us about the extent of this intelligence success? I mean, how are they able to pull this off?
That's a great question. There's a very important piece in the Financial Times today that sort of looks into this equation. And basically, the story seems to be that after quite a bit of monitoring the telecommunications of Hezbollah, they were able to penetrate the communications network. And this goes back to the period right after 2011, 2012, when Hezbollah sent many of its forces into Syria to back the regime of Bashar al-Assad. This is one reason why the Assad regime survived. It's because of that infusion of troops and support. And those Hezbollah fighters, not observing the normal protocols of security that Hezbollah fighters routinely do to prevent detection, started to, I think, send photographs, communicate with relatives back home. The loss of life of Hezbollah fighters resulted in funerals that were attended by many members of the senior leadership of Hezbollah. And Israel was monitoring all of this, and they were able to slowly crack the communications network of Hezbollah, allowing them to, produce the damage that is inflicted on Hezbollah that we've seen over the last 2 weeks. So that's broadly the story that is being reported and revealed right now. And of course, it represents a major setback for this organization.
Indeed. And Professor, some experts see this as a significant turning point in favor of Israel. And reports are saying that they are going after Houthi rebel targets in Yemen now. Just how far do you think they will go?
Well, I think they want to go as far as Tehran, but that remains to be seen. This is, I think, it's what's clear just watching the events is that the Israeli prime minister feels very emboldened by recent successes against Hezbollah, by Israel's ability to basically pulverize and destroy all of Gaza, regardless of what the world and the international community says, or the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court actually rules. Israel has been able to defy global public opinion because it has largely the backing of the United States. So the war in Lebanon is going to continue. I think these successes might even result in an Israeli ground invasion of southern Lebanon to create a buffer zone. And Israel is going to continue to hit out at its other targets around the region. As you mentioned, Houthi rebels today. Perhaps it'll go after more targets in Syria, certainly in Lebanon. But I think the big prize from the Israeli prime minister's perspective is Iran. And reading the news coming out of Tehran, I think this is one reason why Iran has not responded back when everyone thought that they would after the assassination of the leader Hassan Nasrallah. I think Iran knows that this is an Israeli prime minister that is determined to expand the war, to draw Iran in, hoping the United States will join Israel in hurting Iran. And so I think that's very much where things are headed. And it depends on how Iran will respond. But it looks like for now, they're going to play it safe and not give the Israeli prime minister the excuse that he wants to broaden this war into a regional Middle East war.
Okay, so that explains perhaps Iran's behavior in terms of the Ayatollah saying it's up to Hezbollah to lead the retaliation against Israel. But I'm curious, though, why haven't we seen those much touted long-range missiles from Hezbollah, being used right now deeper into Israel?
That's a good question. And I think there's two explanations. One, that Israel has been able to sort of really take out Hezbollah's ability to communicate among its fighters and its commanders, thus preventing the use of those missiles. I think the other reason is a fact that it's not generally discussed in the Western foreign policy discourse about Hezbollah in Iran. This organization in Iran have been portrayed as sort of being formidable adversaries with, 150,000 missiles or projectiles aimed at Israel. We can now see that I think that's grossly exaggerated. This is often a common sort of development in the context of political warfare between adversaries. You exaggerate sometimes the ability of your enemy to hit back. I'm reminded very much of the last decade of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union was, we now know, imploding and very weak from within. But if you recall what the Reagan administration was saying during that last decade, they were portraying the Soviet Union as expanding its nuclear arsenal, expanding its military, on the march, taking over the world, when looking back, we can see that clearly wasn't the case. So I think that's some of that, I think, is also going on in terms of the inability of Hezbollah to respond to Israel.
Right. Professor, I just want to quickly ask you about internal developments in Israel right now. We know the Israeli Prime Minister has the support of a opposition lawmaker, Gideon Saar, who rejoined the coalition. I'm wondering, whether or not this is going to affect Netanyahu's position politically and also his decision-making process from here henceforth.
Well, this certainly helps the Israeli Prime Minister, who was very unpopular after October the 7th. Largely because of, he was the commander in chief when the attack came from Hamas. And so he has a lot to answer for and explain. But I think very much his strategy, and we can see it, bearing fruit, is to drag on the war, expand the war, and try and hit Israel's adversaries, Hamas and Hezbollah. So he'd go back to the Israeli public and say, look, I may have messed up on October the 7th, but I've allegedly made Israel much more safer because I've taken out these two terror organizations that have been our longtime adversary and our longtime foe. And so, give me a second chance. So he's gonna exploit these attacks on Hezbollah for political gain. It remains to be seen whether the Israeli public will, buy into this narrative. But certainly the core base of supporters, and maybe those who were even on the fence now, will lean in his direction, because Hassan Nasrallah was, public enemy number 2 in Israel, perhaps after the Iranian supreme leader. And so his death will be interpreted as a victory for the policies of Netanyahu. But I want to emphasize it's a very short-term victory. Israel's fundamental problem in the Middle East remains the same, and that's the Palestinians. And the inability or refusal by the state of Israel and Netanyahu to reach some sort of just settlement of the Israel-Palestine conflict will keep this conflict going in the Middle East, and will, continually raise questions about Israel's final status in the Middle East because of this, unresolved nature of the Israel-Palestine conflict. So that's not going away. But I think, Netanyahu hopes that it will, and he can just project power and live on to see another day.
And Professor, President Biden said that he will speak to Netanyahu in a bid to avoid an all-out war in the Middle East. Just how much more complicated have Washington's efforts become following the latest strikes? And at what point do you think the U.S. might be compelled to fully leverage its influence against Israel, given that the U.S. election is just, 5 weeks away?
That's a good question. One thing that's surprising here is that the Biden administration has not tried to establish any guardrails or red lines for Israel over the last year. Many people thought that if Israel tried to go after and expand this war in Lebanon, the United States would try and pull it back. But that clearly hasn't happened. I think quietly they're very the White House is very happy that the Hezbollah leader has been killed and the organization has been severely weakened. I think the red line would be if this goes to Iran. I don't think in the middle of an election, as you just pointed out, any American president wants to see a Middle Eastern war. The United States over the last 25 years has not had a good experience fighting wars in the Middle East, especially ground wars. That position is very unpopular. So that might be a red line for the Biden administration, who would try and, seriously put establish consequences for Israel. But that remains to be the same. What we're seeing right now is probably the most pro-Israel government in the history of the United States. And so it's not clear, even if, Netanyahu were to start bombing Iran tomorrow, given what we're seeing from the White House, whether they'll actually try and stop Israel. I'm not sure that will actually happen. I suspect there would be an intense debate in the White House, but it's not clear who would win that debate.
All right, Professor, appreciate your time and your insight this morning. Nader Hashemi, Associate Professor of Middle East and Islamic Politics at Georgetown University. Thank you.